I'm Nigel. The situation for me at the moment is that I'm the Quality Management Clinical Governance Lead for Genetics. That did include pathology until February this year. So we've been working towards 2 NEQAS registrations, one for the genetics laboratory and one for pathology. In terms of genetics, we were assessed in April 2014. We were one of the first genetics laboratories to be accredited. We've just had our re-accreditation visit, so we've been through the entire cycle. Pathology was a somewhat different story. We tried to merge 4 CPA registrations into one pathology one. We applied, we had our main visit in February 2016, and then we withdrew it following the merger between Birmingham Women's Hospital and Birmingham Children's Hospital, which happened in February 2017. And together with all the alignment plans that we had, that we didn't feel as though it was worth going forward, so we've shelved that for the moment. I've also been involved in 2 HTA visits, one for mortuary and one for a research licence in genetics. One MHRA assessment visit for blood transfusion, one CQC inspection for clinical genetics. Also, to my Cost has been currently acting as a consultant quality manager at Liverpool Genetics, which we've been through another couple of assessments. And I also worked for a short time for Birmingham Quality and went through a couple of assessments with them. So I've been inspected and assessed by virtually every regulator in the country so far. And these are really my experiences of that and where we are at the moment. So I don't want to insult everybody's intelligence at this point, but I just thought it was worthwhile defining what quality is. Lord Darcy defined it back in 2010, and he talked about safe and effective care and wanted to ensure that patients had a positive experience from their involvement with healthcare. ISO defines it slightly differently, and that's fine because they're looking at defining quality over a lot of different businesses and areas, and they define it as the degree to which a set of inherent characteristics fulfills requirements. The key word here that I want you to remember is the degree. It implies that we need to measure something to be able to do that. My definition of value is about the level of quality you have for the book you're prepared to pay. So it's about quality and the money. And while we're on definitions, I just wanted to remind you of the WHO definition for patient safety. And that's the prevention of errors and adverse effects. And it's key that you remember that bit about the prevention of errors and adverse effects, and I'll come back to it in a bit later. So what I want to take you through is about the cost of quality. I want to express an opinion about how I think accreditation is adding value or not to medical laboratory work, and what we need to do now to move forward. So cost of quality is not something new. It's been around since 1962, an absolute brilliant year for some of us. A guy called Joseph Duran had some sort of plans about trying to evaluate quality in terms of the cost. So the cost of quality is split up into the cost of poor quality, things that go wrong, things that we do, we put in place, the overheads and that sort of thing that adds to the cost of quality, cost of good quality. So the cost of poor quality is separated into our internal failure costs. I'll give you some examples of that. External failure costs is when the medical laboratory issues an incorrect report and all the consequences of that incorrect report afterwards. And that's extremely difficult to cost out, because how can you cost out somebody having their wrong leg being chopped off or something, or as I heard last week, we removed the wrong rib from a child. Cost of poor quality is not the financial costs, but it's the pain, the misery, the anxiety, and all that sort of stuff that goes with it that you really can't cost out. And then the cost of good quality is the appraisal costs and the prevention costs. And I've just got some quick examples of that. So internal failure costs are the laboratory incidents, non-conformities and errors, all the work that we put into place to resolve that, recording them on our Datix or Ulysses or whatever system we use, all the non-conformities, about putting in the remedial action, investigating, assigning a root cause, putting in the corrective action. All that has a cost. It might be just human beings meeting and discussing things, but it all has a resource cost. Internal quality control failures, repeat assays, goes on all the time. External failure cost is about the patient safety incident, so that's the medical laboratories putting out an incorrect report which impacts on the patient. But even delayed reports can impact on a patient. We've had a series of incidents recently where we've had delayed reports and the patient's turned up and has had to come back and book another payment to come back. It all costs somebody some money and time and anxiety and a loss of reputation. There's also the formal complaints and any litigation that we might get ourselves involved in. So the cost of good quality is appraisal costs and prevention costs. And I've got 2 slides here that gives you some examples of appraisal costs and prevention costs. And every time I look at it, I think that that should be in the other slide, and that one should be in the other slide. And so I've settled down for this. And if anybody wants to argue with me, then that's fine. You can argue with me. I change my mind virtually every other day about whether I've got things in the right cost, but at the end of the day, it's a cost of good quality. So all the acceptance testing we do, also all the reagents that come in that we test before we use them, all the IQC, the EQA, any other testing that we do, all our audits, cost of external assessors, which is not cheap, and of course labour. And then the prevention costs is leadership management costs, again labour costs, capability studies, can we actually do this? And the validations that we go through, designing the actual process in the first place, and then all the training and workforce development costs that we go through. It's expensive, it's not cheap. So the theory goes, and Joseph Duran published a very similar slide to this back in the 1960s. So this is a typical system before any quality management system came into place. And typically we spend 5 to 10% of our costs on prevention costs. We spend about 15 to 25% on appraisal costs. And the rest of the costs that we can control are the cost of failures, things that we have to pay out that we can prevent from happening. And that's quite huge. They said it to be sort of 50, 60, 70% of our costs. So don't worry about the figures up the side, they're just indicative, just to make the slide look sensible. So the theory is that if you increase your prevention costs, you double it, you increase your appraisal costs, then you'll save a huge amount of money by reducing the cost of failure. Okay, and that's great. I don't think anybody would argue about that. The more you put up front, the more you invest in the service up front, the less likely that the system's going to fail and it's going to cost you money. However, so we've got graph here, 100% defects, so you will get that if you don't put any appraisal prevention costs in. If you don't prepare for something, it's highly likely everything's going to fail. The more you can invest, the less defects you have, and the failure costs come down. However, the total cost of quality is these two added together, so you've got this U-shaped curve up here. So the issue we have now is as you get better and better, you need to invest more and more money, and actually the improvement becomes less and less. And that's a significant problem now. We've heard about Theresa May announcing this last week too about the extra investment she's prepared to put into the NHS. It's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you taxes. But where do you put it? You could put a huge amount of money trying to get perfection, or you can put it in things that are kind of failing and that you can see a significant improvement. So putting your money in the right place, investing in the right place is important. So let's move on a bit and start talking about accreditation. So this is from the ISO auditing group, practices group. And they argue that the maturity of the quality management system, as it moves from the left, which is an immature quality management system, over to the right, a very mature quality management system, the patient should be getting a better quality service. Patient outcomes should be better. and that's irrelevant to whether we're complying with any international standard or anything else. So you can be in zone 1, where you've got an immature system and you're not complying and you get poor patient outcomes. You can be in zone 3, so you could comply with all the regulations and still get poor outcomes. And I do know of a laboratory from personal experience that I think is probably in zone 3. They are absolutely superb at getting all the evidence out to NEQAS inspectors and so forth. But I don't think I'd want my sample doing that. Zone 2, so you can get very good patient outcomes. You can be top quality service, but you can still be non-compliant. Compliance is a separate skill in itself. And then there's zone 4, which is where you provide in a superb service and you're compliant with everywhere. Now, I used to think that this used to be zone 4 was the place I wanted to be. But actually, I quite like to be in zone 2 because it's cheaper, it's more efficient. Down at the bottom here would be absolutely ideal. It's provided a cheaper service. Or except I'm not going to get away with that. We need to be in zone 4. And the other issue is that as time goes on, as days go on, as the hours pass, I can find my lab in all 4 of these zones at some point in the day or the week. So the costs of accreditation. So back in 2013, the Government Department of Business Innovation and Skills, which is now DEIS, they produced a report, which is on the website, you can look at it themselves, trying to work out the economics of accreditation. And they did a joint survey, UCAS, with BMTA, which is the British Measurement and Testing Association, the government body, professional body, mainly of 17025 accredited laboratories. And they surveyed 176 businesses. And they came out with this statement: the prices for accredited services were higher than non-accredited services, were on average 8% higher. And we've seen that in the laboratory. You often get, you have to get your balances calibrated. You often, they ask you, do you want a calibrated service or a non-calibrated service, and they charge more for the calibrated services. It's a lot more than 8%, I can tell you, in my experience. But as medical laboratories, we can't do that. We're going to provide the same service whether we're accredited or not. We can't charge extra for it. But it's interesting that most of those businesses decided to go for accreditation for commercial reasons. 50% of them said it was a marketing and reputational issue. 16% said it was a customer requirement, and that probably fits in with us. And just 1 in 5 businesses says there was benefits in efficiency and service quality. A bit worrying, really. So what we tried to do in the genetics laboratory was to try and cost out this poor quality and the cost of quality. So our budget is about £11 million, and this really is fag packet stuff, because once we started it, we realised it wasn't as simple as we thought. So it really is back at the fag packet type of calculations. But our error rate, and that's by our error rate I mean the number of reports we put out that are incorrect in some way. So we've been fairly consistent now for about 8 years, and it's 0.8%. But those of you who are in Six Sigma, you can measure that as a quality standard of 4. So that's not brilliant, it's not poor, that's where we are. We haven't changed for 8 years, regardless of whether it's CBCA, PA, or UCAS accredited. Our internal quality failings, so that's something that issues that we pick up on the way, so non-compliances we pick up during audit and elsewhere. We reckon that's about 5%. So in terms of our budget, 0.8% is about £84,000, and 5% is just over £500,000. So that's the cost of our poor quality. On top of that, if you've ever been on a lean management course, they say that between 1% and 5% of your activity has no added value. So another £500,000 there. So the cost of poor quality to us, we've estimated at between £200,000 and £1 million. Or almost 10% of the review. Quite shocking, really. So the costs of good quality. So what I've added up is all the extra costs that we've invested in our services to get UCAS accreditation to 15189. So we invested £81,000 a year. We've got 2 extra people, a deputy quality manager and a principal clinical scientist whose responsibility is quality. Both part-time posts, and that's cost us £48,000. UCAS fees have gone up an extra £6,000 a year. Calibration costs will spend an extra £10,000 a year. Environmental monitoring will spend an extra £10,000 a year. And our quality management software we're spending about an extra £7,000 a year. On top of that, we've estimated through a survey how much time each individual person in the laboratory spends on quality management, and we've costed that out of just over £500,000. So has it added any value? Really difficult to find this. So we've condemned 2 power packs. So the first accreditation visit we had, the assessor wanted us to calibrate our power packs. We sent them off for calibration, and they were condemned because the outside of the casing was live, apparently. So we probably saved 2 lives. We've had 2 fridges that we just cannot control the temperature in. Numerous thermometers. I cannot believe how inaccurate thermometers are. It was interesting to talk about Graham earlier and saying that we can measure a pencil, the length of a pencil. We obviously can't measure the temperatures, but some of our thermometers were as much as 4 degrees out. It was absolutely amazing. I didn't understand that thermometers could be so far out. We've had numerous incidences of fridges with left open doors that have saved us endless problems. We've had 1 serious incident that the environmental monitoring probably saved us about £7,000 worth of reagents as somebody left a fridge unplugged. I guess the greatest value is that we've got a far better understanding of our systems now than we've had before, and it makes you look in detail at your systems. It has on the first round of accreditation anyway. So I looked on what UCAS thought about how accreditation adds value, and they've got 2 statements on their website. Public health is advanced by accredited service in pathology, diagnostic imaging and physiology. So I put a freedom of information request into UCAS to ask them for the evidence that for this statement, and they refer me back to this statement that's on their website. They cannot provide any evidence that accreditation actually advances public health in any way whatsoever. It does advance international trade, and that's the whole purpose of ISO standards. That's what they're there for. So I suspect it's hugely valued for EQA centres to do that. But for the majority of quality laboratories, medical laboratories, I'm not sure they're involved in international trade. Some of them are, I guess. Not all of them. Well, I've come up with this hashtag here. As quality manager, I get constant, this is UCAS's fault, this is UCAS's fault, this is UCAS's fault. And I don't always agree to a lot of the stuff that we are doing for UCAS we would be doing anyway. The things I have problems are probably in 4 particular areas. One is that plans. We have got endless plans now to do everything. We cannot do anything without a plan. Unless you can provide evidence that you've got a plan to introduce something, then you can't do it. And we put our plans together, we put dates, and we ignore the dates because we can't do it. And so it's just unrealistic. I put standardise, and I know this goes against the first 2 speakers who are edging to standardise everything, and I've got no problems with the things that they were saying. Problem is that I have is that the NHS and healthcare system treats 60-odd million patients. They don't all want the same system. They all come with different requirements. So always to stand everything it could be detrimental to patient care. So there is a place for not following the standardised procedure, but UCAS don't seem to understand that. Competence. I've got no problems with competence per se. It's the bureaucracy that's the competence requirements are causing that causes me a problem. I have never known in 4 years somebody come to me with some competence evidence to say this person's failed. Every bit of competence paperwork we've got says this person's competent. So I'm not quite sure what the value of doing that is. And even talking to UCAS at the last visit, they reckon they've gone a bit OTT with it. The real problem I have is the constant setting of targets. And Lord Francis talked about this as well when he, in his report to the staff's inquiry, that as soon as you set a target, people start game playing. And it feels to me, it reminds me of this game that the kids used to play, is Whack Attack, because you try to control one target, you move resources from one area to the other area to try and deal with it. So you move the hammer from one to try and knock one thing down, and the other one pops up. And that's what it feels like to me. You've got so many targets now that you try and control one by moving resources from one area to control that target, and then that area you just move resources from starts missing their targets, and that's what it feels like. In the new genetics reconfiguration contract, there's 64 different targets, which is absolutely ridiculous. So I have a problem. The other thing they fail to understand, I think, is the variation that we get across the system. They understand uncertainty of measurement, but they don't seem to understand variance in human beings. Just something I'll come back to in a second. So they need to reduce this variance. I think the variance in human beings, particularly in UCAS assessors, is huge. I have been through 7 quality assessment managers now, and the inconsistency between them all is huge. Despite challenging UCAS to say you need to sort this out, they say there's no variance in their systems, which I find worryingly naive, to be honest. Yeah. So let's just come back to the cost of quality. Just not this part at the moment. The cost of our quality, we reckon, is somewhere between 0.8 and 1.6 million. Well over 10% of our budget. Cost of poor quality is between up to £1 million, and cost of good quality is around 600,000. So we come back to here. Now, accreditation, I believe, will only get you to this minimum level. Okay, so it gets you into this area here. So if you're trying to decide whether I should go to accreditation or not, if you're on this part of the curve, I would say yes, do it. If you're on this part of the curve, I would suggest that it's probably a waste of time. It's not going to add any value whatsoever to your services, or very little value. So, get the last slide. So what I wanted to do, the cost of to improve the services is going to cost us a lot of money, and we haven't got a lot of money. Nobody's going to invest huge amounts of money in medical laboratories that I can foresee at the moment. So what I wanted to work out is can we extend this into a more of a flat bottom U rather than a flat U like that. We can extend this out here before it goes up. Then we've got a chance of improving the quality of our services without necessarily costing too much more. Okay. So there's 2 theories about safety. Safety 1 has been predominant in the UK since the 1960s. It talks about the absence of unwanted and unexpected outcomes. So going back to the Hugh definition of patient safety, it's a bimodal process, so you either get it right or you get it wrong. It's correct or incorrect. It assumes there are identifiable failures. If you're building a car, you can break down a car into its component parts, and you can work out which part has failed and do something about it. Healthcare is a bit more difficult to that, because each of the component parts is not independent. NHS is interdependent on all its constituent parts. So if one part fails, it's going to affect everything else. If you change one part of the system, it's potentially going to affect everything else. So it's not quite as easy to use Safety 1 in healthcare. I don't think it quite works. It assumes that humans are variable, which they are, and that they are a problem. You control the humans, you control the quality of the service. You can identify causes in that way, and then you can get rid of unacceptable risks. Safety 2, on the other hand, takes a different look at it. So safety 1 looks when there's an error. So this is this bit of the curve here. So this is our system. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's brilliant, sometimes it fails completely. So what we do is our improvements concentrate on these failures. And the problem is that that's very little information there. What we're actually missing is 98% of the information in the system. So my argument is that if we concentrate on what's going well, what's good, what's brilliant, rather than what's failing, then we're likely to improve our services rather than concentrate on what's failing, because what's failing will really only maintain the status quo. So the system's ability to see under varying conditions, especially those seen in healthcare, where demands are continually increasing. Very complex systems. NHS is probably the most complex system there is in the world. And the system is intractable, so we can't... So Toyota have a system, for instance, where if there's a problem with the quality, somebody can yank the cord and the system stops. Yeah, nothing else comes through until they've resolved the quality issue. You can't do that in healthcare. When the snow falls in December and everybody's struggling to get into work and everything, we can't pull the system and stop it, so we're not doing this. It's probably a time when healthcare is more needed. So we must look at things that go right. Clinical systems are not bimodal, they cannot be decomposed, and the outcomes need to be variable because patients are variable. So we need to focus on the success. So I'll just have a quick word about learning from excellence. This has been developed by a colleague of mine, Adrian Plunkett, who is looking at so he's trying to look at these the 2% of brilliant occurrences at this end and trying to learn about the system. So we come back to Lord Darby's definition of quality. It has to be safe, effective, and with a patient-positive experience. That doesn't talk about failures. That talks about brilliance, about excellence. So in summary, I'll just step back because there's a trapdoor here. Accreditation does add value, but depends where you are on the total cost of quality curve. Accreditation will only achieve minimum standard. And accreditation needs to exist. I'm not suggesting it needs to disappear, but safety 1 and safety 2 need to coexist to achieve excellence. Some references there. I presume these slides will be available to everybody, and I'll leave you with a final thought, soon as the World Cup, from a very good football manager. Thank you. I'll answer any questions.